Two factories sit side by side. Same industry, same size, same machines, same year. One stays government-owned, the other gets a private owner. A few years later, they're not even close.
And nothing physical separates them. Same starting line. So whatever pulled them apart has to be something you can't see on the factory floor. That's what I want to find, here on the Cause and Effect Show.
Picture a factory in a Chinese city around the year 2000. Same building, same machines, same workers as the year before. The only thing that changed is the name on the ownership papers. It went from the government to a private owner. And yet, a few years later, that factory is producing meaningfully more with the same inputs.
So nothing physical changed, but the output did. I want to know what actually flips inside a firm when the owner changes, and whether it's the change everyone assumes or something quieter.
That's exactly the puzzle. There's a new paper in the Journal of Law and Economics looking at the largest privatization program in human history, China's, around the turn of the century. Bigger than the post-Soviet wave everyone studies.
Bigger than the former Soviet states?
Right. Good productivity evidence on it was surprisingly thin. Most studies looked at big listed companies selling shares on stock exchanges where the government still kept control. But that was about 1% of China's privatizations. The real story was thousands of smaller state firms fully handed to private owners under a slogan, "Grab the big, let go the small."
So let me put that in plain English. The state kept its giant strategic companies and offloaded the small and mid-sized ones it was tired of subsidizing.
Right, and many were losing money. The researchers used a government dataset covering essentially all of China's industrial state firms from 1998 to 2009, over 80,000 state firms, of which at least 15,000 got privatized.
That's a huge sample. So what's the catch? Why is this hard to measure?
Selection. The government might hand off the firms that were already about to improve. If you just compare privatized firms to everyone else, you can't tell if privatization caused the gain or if they were winners anyway.
So a naive comparison would basically take credit for improvements that were coming regardless.
Exactly. So they did something careful. For each privatized firm, they found a twin, a state firm in the same narrow industry, the same year, same size, same recent productivity trend that stayed state-owned. Then they compared how each pair changed before and after.
Like matching two patients who are identical on paper, giving one the treatment and watching what happens.
That's the right picture, and here's why the matching matters. When they used the crude full sample comparison, privatization looked like it raised productivity by only about 5%.
Modest, but not nothing.
But once they compared each firm to its proper twin, the effect jumped to roughly 13 to 15%. The elementary method was actually hiding the real gain.
That's the opposite of what I'd expect. Usually the fancy methods shrink the effect. Here, cleaning up the comparison made it bigger.
But here's where it gets interesting. They went looking for where that gain came from, and it wasn't where you'd guess.
I'd guess new investment. New owner pours in money, buys equipment, builds a new product line.
The opposite. After privatization, firms used about 5% less capital. They borrowed less, and new product development didn't budge.
Wait, so they grew output while spending less on machines and inventing nothing new? How?
Management. Value added rose about 4% while the firm cut its workforce by roughly 4%. The same operation, run tighter and more efficiently. The evidence points to better run management, harder effort, fewer wasted resources, not innovation or a cash injection.
That makes intuitive sense, actually. When a politician runs a factory, keeping people employed is a goal in itself. The owner-manager has a different question every morning. Where am I bleeding money?
That's the mechanism in a sentence. A state manager isn't the one who keeps the savings, so trimming waste isn't their fight. An owner keeps what they save, so suddenly it is.
So is the lesson just private always beats public?
It isn't, and this is the part I find most important. The gains showed up strongly only in competitive industries. In industries with lots of rivals, privatization boosted productivity around 15%. In concentrated industries with few competitors, it was closer to 8%.
So privatizing a firm with no competition just hands someone a private monopoly. The discipline isn't ownership alone, but ownership plus someone breathing down your neck.
Precisely. And one more wrinkle. For the big firms the central government kept a hand in, the strategic ones, privatization did basically nothing for productivity, sometimes slightly negative.
Because those firms were essentially given a monopoly, so there was less incentive to compete and operate more effectively. So the headline isn't privatize everything. It's that ownership reform paid off, but only because the surrounding conditions were right.
That's the tension worth sitting with. The evidence suggests this program was a major engine of China's growth. And yet in the last decade, China has reversed course. State lending to state firms jumped from under a third to over 80% in just 5 years, and loss-making state firms climbed right back up.
Which is why this paper feels less like history and more like a live question. If careful evidence says ownership plus competition transformed a loss-making sector, what does walking it back cost?
That's the thread I want to keep pulling. If you've ever wondered why two near-identical firms end up worlds apart, stick with us. We're going to keep following where the cause and effect leads. Here's a question for you watching. Where else do you see the ownership plus competition rule playing out? Schools, utilities, your own industry?
Drop it in the comments. We read them, and the good ones genuinely shape what we dig into next. That's half the fun of doing this in the open. And if you liked this content, leave a like and subscribe on our channel to see more.